While the eclipse pointer marched box to box, a louder question gathered in the margins. Where did hands learn to cut teeth like this? And why did those hands vanish? Precision leaves fingerprints. Dividing lines, templates, specialized scribes, peening habits. None of that shows up in tombs, hoards, or shipwrecks in a way that adds up to a named shop. We have a masterpiece and no workbench. Start with the absence. No jigs for marking equal angles. No dividing plates with regular pricks around a rim. No half-finished gear blanks tossed aside in a corner. Workshops shed debris, wasted metal, broken arbors, test pieces cut wrong. Bronze was valuable, sure, and scrap gets remelted, but not all of it. And yet the archaeology goes quiet on toolkits that could generate prime-tooth families on command. It feels like walking into a theater after the play. The set's gone, the floor swept, one torn ticket stub left under a seat. Context should help, and it both does and doesn't. The ship that carried the mechanism sank with statues, luxury goods, and rare ceramics. That reads like a high-status cargo, commissioned work headed from one elite to another. The mechanism wasn't a market-stall trinket. It looks like a bespoke instrument packaged with a cosmology, possibly with a manual, meant for a patron who could ask priests and pilots to listen. That points to cities where knowledge and money braided tight. Rhodes sits in every serious candidate list. Hipparchus worked there. It had a tradition of astronomical observation and a reputation for shipbuilding and navigation. Pergamon had libraries and workshops serving courts thirsty for devices. Syracuse carried the shadow of Archimedes, where mathematics and mechanics once met under siege. Inscriptions on the mechanism carry a Doric-flavored koine, a dialect hint that pulls toward Rhodes or its sphere. Audience clues point to literate users comfortable with technical Greek and ritual annotations. All arrows nudge toward an Aegean shop that spoke both math and metal. But then the gap yawns again. If Rhodes had a bench where epicycles became slots, where are the siblings? The arguments try to fill in. Bronze gets melted, wood rots, wars flatten libraries, copyists hate diagrams, guilds guard secrets, patrons bury their toys with themselves. All true, yet traditions echo. You'd expect spillover, simpler devices, teaching tools, gear-driven sundials, apprentice plates with timid scratches. We don't have them in a chain that leads cleanly to this box. What we do have is tantalizing debris. Another gear fragment turned up among the Antikythera finds decades after the first study, suggesting the original device was bigger, maybe a family of functions now lost. Isolated gear bits from other sites surface without inscriptions to tie them to a system. A later Roman era odometer with gearing proves teeth weren't alien. Water clocks with complex escapements show mechanical fluency. Automata pranced in Hellenistic courts, but it's a scattershot chorus. None carry a clear genetic line to the lunar anomaly and the Saros spiral. Here's a parallel track most people miss, the social economy of knowledge. If a workshop served elites, the first loyalty was to patrons, not publication. Devices became soft power. A city that can schedule eclipses throws a shadow longer than any trireme. That environment breeds secrecy. Masters train a few apprentices inside households. Drawings stay on wax tablets that get wiped. When a siege comes or a patron dies, the bench goes quiet, the tools get repurposed, the methods thin. Add Roman tastes, pragmatic engineering over celestial toys, and the market for cosmic calculators shrinks. The craft survives in other forms, just not in the one we're hunting. Tool marks whisper anyway. Consistent pressure angles say someone standardized tooth patterns. Overstruck letters on the dials say inscriptions were corrected during assembly. Text and mechanism maturing together in one room. The coaxial shafts, tubular and nested, say a maker had a way to bore straight and true without a modern lathe. Those are not village improvisations. They're the residue of a place where specialists argued over a half degree and reached for the same file every time. It's tempting to solve the void with a single name. Call it Archimedes. Declare it his students. But the dialect and the dating don't sit cleanly with Syracuse in his day, and the design choices lean toward Rhodes after him. More important, hero labels flatten networks. One genius doesn't crank out prime-tooth cultures alone. He sits at a table with observers, table makers, money, and muscle. The mechanism's very existence says team, not lonely spark. So either a tradition vanished nearly overnight, or our records stitched with holes. Fires in libraries matter. Port archives sink. Rural temples collapse and get quarried. The copyists who favored poetry over procedural diagrams made sure odes outlived. Manuals. For 2,000 years, sand-buried shipwrecks. It shouldn't surprise us that a delicate bronze brain slipped between footnotes. It should bother us that we're content with that. While that was happening in the scholarly world, arguments about gaps and ghosts, the metal kept insisting. Someone had a bench where gears got graded, a wall where tables hung, a shelf where finished boxes waited for patrons. We haven't found that room. We might never. But every consistent tooth, every calibrated spiral, every corrected letter points back to it like a compass. And that's the headache for the timeline. If the workshop's missing, is it because it never existed, or because it was one room in a wider system we haven't learned to see? 1,000 years too soon. While curators argued about workshops, a darker realization crept in. The calendar computer in those fragments sat like a mountain peak with no foothills. From this device, you're supposed to walk down a slope into Roman gadgetry, into early medieval contraptions, and arrive at the great astronomical clocks of Europe. But the slope isn't there. It's a cliff. We jump from a 1st century BCE gear brain to cathedral towers ticking in the 14th century. That's 1,000-year silence. Here's why that silence bites. Roman engineering is everywhere: arches, aqueducts, pumps, odometers with gears counting cart miles. And yet fine astronomical gearing is rare to invisible. The Roman taste leaned practical, heavy, standardized. You see worm gears driving mills, but not pin and slot epicycles whispering lunar speeds. The craft to cut teeth existed. It just wasn't pointed at the sky in ways we can hold in our hands. So the mechanism looks like an Aegean comet streaking across a Roman blue, then gone. Knowledge doesn't vanish politely. It fragments. Wars torch libraries. Scribes copy poetry over procedures because poems sell. Workshops close when patrons die. Bronze gets melted into coin. A siege turns devices into scrap. That's the brutal physics of history. And yet, even in collapse, traditions leave crumbs, student pieces, imitations, manuals. With Antikythera, we get almost none of that. The gap isn't just long, it's clean, like someone swept. What nobody knew at the time of the first reconstructions was that the wreck wasn't done talking. Decades after the initial studies, another fragment surfaced from the museum's storerooms. Part of a gear train that tightened models and suggested more functions were once attached. That late whisper matters. It hints the original instrument was richer than the already staggering core. And if one complex device rode that ship, there could have been a family of them serving elites. One ship down doesn't mean one workshop total. Meanwhile, across continents, water clocks in the Islamic Golden Age sprouted ingenious escapements and programmable displays, preserving and expanding mechanical astronomy. Automata in Byzantine courts charmed ambassadors with birds that sang and lions that roared. Chinese mechanicians built armillary spheres and geared towers. Europe, centuries later, built astronomical clocks that pushed planets around gilded dials. The world remembered how to lace gears into predictions. But the European gearwork that finally matched Antikythera's astronomical ambition feels like a rediscovery, not a handoff. The parchment that should bridge the Aegean bench to Strasbourg's cathedral clock is blank or buried. There's another angle nobody likes to say out loud: suppression by neglect. When empires change taste, tools lose status. Rome absorbed Greece and kept the math in books, but the courtly gadget culture thinned. A cosmological calculator that flatters a Hellenistic ruler's image might look like a toy to a Roman prefect who needs siege engines and tax tables. Funding flows shape what survives. A century of different spending can erase a craft's public face, while leaving just enough talent to keep ships sailing and mills grinding. What about guild secrecy? It keeps appearing as a soft explanation. Masters teach sons, not strangers. Techniques remain oral, encoded in gesture, not ink. If a line breaks, plague, revolt, exile, the method dies with a handful of hands. The mechanism reads like a product of that kind of intimacy. Coaxial tubes fitted until they glide. Pressure angles that repeat because a particular file lived on a particular bench. Inscriptions corrected as the build evolves. That's a household craft, not an academy course. Skeptics push back. The Greeks were brilliant. One extraordinary device proves high ceilings, not aliens or hidden empires. True, but ceilings usually sit on walls. Where are the walls? From Antikythera to medieval clocks, we have isolated marvels. Heroes' pneumatics, villains' trick pitchers, Archimedes' legends, later Islamic clocks, European automata. The line is dotted, not continuous. And our mechanism sits at an awkward altitude in that dotted line. Too accurate, too integrated, too tuned. To be a lone hill. The stakes of admitting this gap aren't just academic. If knowledge can spike and then disappear for a millennium, our own stories about inevitable progress get shaky. It says a society can hold advanced technique in a small circle and lose it when that circle snaps. That's not comforting. It means archives matter more than myths, and redundancy beats genius if you want memory to survive. While that argument unfolds, one stubborn fact keeps needling the consensus. Every time we resolve a new inscription, it ties the box tighter to practice. Start dates, month names, correction marks, operational language, not showmanship. This wasn't a model under glass. It was a tool with a service life. Tools like that invite duplication. Duplication implies a shop. A shop implies a market. A market implies a culture. So either the culture's traces are still underwater, still mislabeled in drawers, or buried under modern streets, or we've trained ourselves not to recognize them when we see them. What nobody expected was how personal the gap would feel. A diver in 1901 grabs a lump and changes a century's mind. A curator in 1959 peers through X-rays and hears gears whisper. A graduate student decades later notices a fragment in a tray and moves a pointer half a box. People keep finding the past where it shouldn't be. Social proof that sustains curiosity and sharing. And each discovery tightens the same squeeze. If this machine is genuine, and it is, it landed 1,000 years too soon for our timeline. Which means the timeline needs fixing, not the metal. The Archimedes hypothesis under stress. While everyone stared at the cliff in the timeline, a comfortable answer started making the rounds. Call it Archimedes. Cicero wrote that Archimedes made a device that showed the motions of the heavens, planets, moon, sun. So why not hang Antikythera on the greatest engineer's hook and go home? It's neat. It's heroic. And it short-circuits the harder question. What network could actually build this? Let's lay out what the texts say. Cicero describes a sphere that reproduced celestial motions, built by Archimedes and later displayed in Rome. Posidonius, another Rhodes name, supposedly crafted similar planetaria. Ancient audiences loved demonstrations where planets crept along armillary rings. Those accounts prove a tradition of display machines existed. They don't prove tooth counts, inscriptions, or a pin-ant slot. They don't name the bench that cut a 223-step Saros spiral. Now look at the object in our hands. The inscription's letter forms and vocabulary land us in the Hellenistic world, but not in Archimedes' Syracuse. Linguists here koine with Doric flavor, Rhodes territory, a century after his death. The function set isn't a theatrical planetarium. It's a calendar bureau toolkit, metonic management, Saros and Exeligmos tracking, zodiac with lunar phase, weather and omen notes. That's a different user story. Archimedes' legend sits in a court of siege engines and paradoxes. This box reads like an office instrument for a literate civil religious operator. Design lineage pushes the same way. The Antikythera device hides sophistication behind compact gearing. The anomaly solution is an epicyclic pin-ant slot buried in a stack, not a ring and sphere walkthrough for a noble's salon. Planet tracking would need additional trains and displays we don't see in the surviving fragments. Reconstructions that try to cram 5 visible planets onto this chassis start inventing wheels the metal doesn't support, given current fragmentary evidence. The safer read is narrower: sun, moon, calendars, eclipses. That's already audacious without adding Mars. Why does attribution by fame keep coming back? Because our brains want single causes. A name collapses uncertainty into a story we know how to tell. The lone genius who leapt ahead. But the metal argues for a shop that solved 1,000 little problems. Coaxial tubes that don't bind, pressure angles that repeat, tick marks engraved so consistently you'd swear a template sat under the stylus. Those are communal habits, not one man's afternoon. There's also the date problem. Archimedes died in 212 BCE. The shipwreck is 1st century BCE. Could a device in his tradition survive and sail 100 years later? Maybe. Ideas do drift forward. But the dialect and the explicit cycle labels, metonic, calypic, Saros, Exeligmos, feel like vocabulary standardized after his era, shaped by Rhodes' school of observation. Hipparchus, working on Rhodes in the 2nd century BCE, is the better candidate for the theory pipeline feeding this machine, even if he never touched a file. That still doesn't name a builder. It names a place where tables met brass. Skeptics push a counterpoint. If Cicero saw a planetarium with predictive gears, why can't Antikythera be its cousin? Fair. Yet cousins share features you can point at. The mechanism's surviving faces are dense with month boxes, eclipse glyphs, and user instructions in compact script. A showpiece planetarium would advertise planets visibly. It would boast of Mars and Jupiter with labeled pointers. Here, the inscriptional voice is operational. Do this, read that, note the node. If you strip the romance, you're left with a disciplined appliance. The human angle matters because names shape careers. Slap Archimedes on the device and you smuggle prestige into any claim about lost knowledge. You also blind yourself to apprentices and patrons. A hero label can erase a network of shipwrights, navigators, temple scribes, and bronze cutters who all fed the bench. It can also hide the obvious. To deliver this precision, someone needed steady orders, repeatable processes, and feedback from users. That smells like an institution, not a savant. What nobody knew until the scans read the layers was how iterative the thing feels. Overstruck letters show corrections mid-build. Tooth counts align with prime-heavy choices you make when you're tuning ratios, not drafting a monument. The pin and slot offset looks calibrated to a particular dataset, not myth. That's test and revise behavior, the heartbeat of a working shop. If you want an ancient name, call it what it is, a Rhodian program. So what does Archimedes give us here? Permission to believe that Greeks could imagine machines that map the sky. He opens the ceiling, proves the culture's appetite for mechanism tied to mathematics. But when we force his shadow over this box, the details start arguing back. Wrong city, wrong century, wrong use case. The safer, sharper claim is bigger and more unsettling. This wasn't a lone genius artifact. It was an output of a network that could turn Babylonian periods and Greek geometry into hand-cranked time. If we accept that, the search shifts from a single statue's pedestal to a street of doorways, teachers, scribes, cutters, patrons, most of which we haven't found. And that's the point. Misattribution doesn't just get the credit wrong. It masks the mechanism we really need to chase. Knowledge moving along trade routes, tables distilled in observatories, bronze shaped by hands that expected to make another one next season. If we stop at Archimedes, we stop the hunt. If we ask who trained the maker, who paid him, who calibrated the start dates, we might finally see the network that built the box, and why it fell silent. Knowledge transfer, terrestrial and otherwise. While the Archimedes shortcut crumbled, another path opened that felt riskier and more honest. Trace the data. The mechanism's teeth don't come from inspiration, they come from numbers. Babylon had numbers, centuries of eclipse records, synodic months, zigzag functions that turned the moon's wander into predictability. Egypt kept calendar discipline, 365-day civil years that never slipped, bureaucrats who lived by lists. Greece built geometry, models that could turn a column of periods into a story about circles. Trade routes braided those strands together. Follow the routes. Ships left the Levant with cedar and cuneiform habits. They reached roads with navigators who counted nights by stars. Merchants swapped barley for papyrus, and, without noticing, swapped rules for intercalation and priestly start dates. Libraries didn't just hoard scrolls, they hosted travelers who carried table talk back to workshops. The mechanism looks like the end of that pipeline. Babylonian periods translated into Greek labels, set on an Egyptian-style calendar ring. Hybridization you can crank. Data pipelines are cold until they hit a bench. Someone had to decide that 235 months in 19 years wasn't just a scribal curiosity, but a gear ratio worth cutting. Someone had to take a Saros, 223 synodic months, and give it boxes. Hipparchus' catalog told them where the moon slowed. The maker turned that into an offset pin. You can hear the conversation, one voice reciting periods, another asking, what tooth counts land closest? Knowledge moved from temple to table to tool. Here's the ceiling problem. Pooled methods from Babylon, Egypt, and Greece get you far. Do they get you all the way to a pin and slot tuned to an animalistic month, while an Exeligmos indexes a 54-year remainder? The texts we trust are messy, incomplete, and stingy with procedure. The mechanism feels cleaner than its sources. That's where people start whispering about an archive we haven't found, or about a push from outside the usual map. Lost civilization theories love that gap. They say the device is a shard from a pre-cataclysm library, Atlantis by another name, where cycles were codified long before Greece. The story is seductive. A mother culture drowns, fragments survive in priestly riddles, then reappear as sudden genius. The Antikythera box, in that telling, is a survivor, not an invention. But stories don't cut teeth. What we can test is material and language. The bronze is ancient Greek. The inscriptions are Greek. The user assumptions are Greek. If a deeper archive fed this, it dissolved into Greek hands so completely that only the math remained, matching current metallurgical and epigraphic analyses. Then there's the louder speculation, non-terrestrial input. The argument goes like this: if knowledge jumps, someone jumped it. Give a Rhodian shop perfect periods, and you get perfect gearing. But we don't see fingerprints of alien tooling. No steel harder than the age. No machined involutes with impossible tolerances. The device feels period authentic. Triangular teeth, file marks, overstrikes, wooden case. If an outsider whispered numbers, the whisper got written in Greek script and carved with Greek slips. So where does that leave the ceiling? With a quieter but sharper idea. Hidden archives that were terrestrial and boring, bureau records, temple logs, navigator almanacs that got burned, rotted, or reused. The mechanism implies tables finer than most surviving texts, but that's a survivorship problem, not a UFO. When you fold weather notes and wind omens into eclipse boxes, you're not cribbing from a starship. You're reflecting a bureaucracy that married sky to schedule. Still, something nags. The device doesn't look experimental. It looks iterative, choices settled, errors corrected, a voice confident enough to add an Exeligmos index. That implies earlier versions, teacher machines, maybe clumsier cousins that wore out on somebody's desk. If those sat in a workshop, the workshop sat in a city with money and a reason to plan decades ahead. A naval power, a festival hub, a place where sailors cared about nodes as much as merchants cared about harvest dates. Rhodes rings that bell. Meanwhile, elsewhere, knowledge transfer wasn't mystical, it was contractual. A patron pays a scholar to compile tables. The scholar brings them to a bronze cutter. The bronze cutter builds a box that makes the scholar's patron look prophetic. The shipwreck's cargo tells you the client list, statues for display, instruments for prestige. If a tool like this traveled, it traveled with status. That's how a single bench can punch above its weight, by making time feel tame for people who rule cities. What nobody knew at the time of the first scans was how much the inscriptions would anchor the argument. They don't read like a relic from a lost empire. They read like a working manual by people who knew their audience. Pointer, aperture, month names, cycle labels. They're practical, localized, and legible to a Greek literate class. The device might have ancestors we can't see. It might rest on tables that went to ash. But the hands we can see belong to a network we can map. Babylonian records boiled into cycles, Greek geometry turned into trains, Rhodian craft turned into gears. So terrestrial or otherwise, the safe call is mundane and staggering.